Hello and welcome to our special Thursday interview here on Viking.TV with me, Anne Diamond. And as I'm sure you know by now, it is Scotland Week. And if you've never been, well, you certainly should, because Scotland is one of the most richly historic parts of the world. And also, if you're lucky enough to get good weather, it's one of the most beautiful. They always say, don't they, that if you want magnificent scenery, green meadows, lush woodland, and shimmering lakes and rivers, then you have to have a mix of sunshine and showers, hot and cold. And certainly that is true of Scotland. A bit of everything weather-wise. It delivers, though, spectacular scenery like this. I mean, isn't that just sumptuous? Good enough to be a painting, makes you want to paint, that too. And these are all places we are going to hear about in the next few moments. Look at that. You couldn't hope for more delicious views. What a fantastic environment to visit, to grow up in, to call your own. Well, my guests this week have done just that. They have lived there, grown up there, and now through their family history, they are part of that legacy, which means managing, curating, celebrating their history. Their surname, Tennant, is a very famous name here in Britain. They come from a large and influential family which has spread its tentacles all over the world. So let's now meet cousins Flora and Edward Tennant. Flora from her home in Los Angeles. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. And Edward from his home in Elgin in Scotland. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Now, happy Burns Week. I don't know whether you celebrate. Did either of you celebrate Burns Night?
I have in the past. I did last year when I was living in Scotland at the time, and I love a big celebration, whatever the reason may be. So I definitely went all out. But this year, being in LA, probably can't get a hold of a haggis, so don't know if I will be celebrating.
That could be a blessing. Probably quite a difficult one to explain to all your friends in LA. What about you, Ed? Do you like to celebrate Burns Night?
We do when we can, when the joys of COVID restrictions don't stop us from having a proper party.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't really need much of an excuse to drink whiskey, so it's always a joy to enjoy it on an occasion.
Now, this is interesting because there is a family link to Robbie Burns, isn't there? Who knows
there
about
is,
that?
yes. Yeah, so
Cool.
the original Charles Tennant, who was the industrialist and invented bleach, he was actually Robbie Burns's godson.
Goodness me, that close a link. Did you know that?
He was indeed.
I know that.
Yeah. Well, there you are.
So there is a poem. There is a poem in which Robbie Burns refers to somebody called Wabster Charlie. Now, Wabster is Old Scots for a weaver, and that was Charles's father, who was a weaver in Ayrshire and a farmer. And that was Robbie Burns referring to his friend as a weaver.
That's quite something, isn't it? That really is a very strong link. So tell us about this Charles Tennant, who's the first tenant that we think of, the head of the family, the beginning of it all. He founded the dynasty. Who was he? You mentioned there very briefly that he invented bleach.
So Charles was an industrialist. So he was a chemist. He was a farmer's son from Ayrshire. But he found his love in things that went bang, things that went pop. And in those days, bleaching of linen and cotton was done using urea and on the fields, which was acres and acres outside Glasgow, where they used to hang out soaked sheets to bleach in the sun. Yeah. And he commercialized bleaching powder. So the formula for bleach existed, but he actually created the bleaching powder. The company that he created is now the company we know as ICI, which is obviously the largest chemical company in the world.
Yes.
And he, at the time, had the largest chemical works in Europe at St. Rollox in Glasgow. There's a very big statue of him in the town square. He worked with some other rather famous people. Rennie Mackintosh, who obviously invented the raincoat as we know it today. And Charles obviously had a big problem with the size of the site of his factory was moving coal from one warehouse to another warehouse. So he sat down with another friend of his, Mr. Stevenson, and they came up with the steam engine.
Well, yeah, the Stephenson's rocket.
Correct.
Isn't that extraordinary? 3 amazing trains. And that, I mean, it was an era of invention, but that really is an amazing story. Gosh, what a lineage. So tell me how you two are related. You're cousins. So is there anything you can make that live for us and try and explain it in a way that we can understand? Because obviously we don't know all your antecedents.
Basically, our dads are brothers, and that's really what it is.
Yep.
So even though you're thousands of miles apart at the moment, you know each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't really grow up in the UK in the same way. We kind of left when I was 7, and we did lots of traveling around and came out. We lived in Los Angeles as well growing up, and then but I came back at 18 to go to Edinburgh University, and that's kind of where I've when I started to remake the UK my home. And even though I live in LA now, I just moved out here a few months ago. So so I was back in the UK for 10 years, almost 10 years, and the UK is definitely home. But so Ed and I have kind of grown up together, kind of not grown up together, but it's nice in my kind of adult life to get to know him through being up at the house more and more.
Yes, and Ed, I mean, do you have big family get-togethers at all? I know, obviously, in the last 2 years,
absolutely,
possible, but
yeah, we always have had. It's always been part of life for me growing up as a child. And as Flora said, we didn't, as cousins, we weren't actually around each other when we were younger. I mean, despite my appearances, I am a bit older than Flora, so I think there are some photographs of her sitting on my knee when she was about 4, and I was undisclosed amounts of years older than her. But for us, the big time of year is always Hogmanay in Scotland here. So New Year's time, we've always had a massive party at the house. We've always tried to include as many family members as we can and sort of gather them in from all around the world. But we're not actually, the immediate family isn't actually that big. There's actually, out of Flora and I's parents, there were 3 of them. There was Mark, my father, who was the eldest, Christopher, who was Flora's father, who was the second one, and Emma, who was the younger one. So actually, for quite a sizable heritage, there's only 5 first cousins. So there's not a lot of us.
No, and it's important to keep in touch, isn't it, then? In that case, sometimes
absolutely,
it's moments like that when you feel we've got to work hard at making sure this family does stick together.
But for me, even growing up kind of not in the UK and here and there, the New Year's parties were always something that was so special to me, and that's where I learned to reel from such a young age. And reeling, which is Scottish dancing, is still, I mean, it's one of my top 5 favorite things to do in the whole world. Those times have been so special to me and so grounding in a familial sense, which we weren't really a part of just because we weren't there. But New Year was always something to come back to at Innis, and forever grateful to Ed and his dad for doing those and continuing those parties.
Yes, it is.
And I think the other thing is I've never traveled extensively or lived abroad like Flora, but I've traveled, but not quite as much as Flora. But having lived in England up until relatively recently, with my young family and stuff, Scotland has a pull, it has a draw to all those who belong and all those who have grown up there or have heritage there. So even though Flora's got the American twang, she was an LA kid when she was younger, and there was still a pull. And even Flora's dad, who lived all over the world, Scotland was still part of his heart, and I think it's a country that just draws you back in regardless of where you are.
Now, I know a lot of people watching at the moment, we have so many of our audience are American. They'll have noticed something, as you said, the twang of your accents. Neither of you sound Scottish, but your blood is, isn't it?
It is, and I always find the accent thing a bit strange. What makes a Scottish accent? You should actually say you don't have to say someone doesn't sound English is equally as crazy, because they might have a Yorkshire accent, they might have a Cornwall accent, they might have a Devon accent, And up here, they speak differently in Fife to Aberdeen to Glasgow to the Highlands and Islands, and up on Shetland, it sounds Norwegian. So, it's a very different thing. So I think the accent is where you're, the environment in which you're raised. My mother was English, so there was no Scottish accent at home, if you like.
Tell me about the link to Gordonston School then. Where does that come from?
So that comes from our grandfather. Flora and I shared grandfather, Sir Ian Tennant. Sir Ian and his wife, the Lady Margaret, were very closely linked to the royal family. So the Lady Margaret's brother was actually married to Princess Alexandra. So our great uncle was married to Princess Alexandra. So in that photo, this is Charles at Gordonston with the Queen, just outside the services centre, actually. It was well known that Charles absolutely loathed the school. He hated it. He called it Colditz and Kilts. He was miserable. He was bullied. And in the background is my grandfather there, behind Philip and Charles. So while Charles was there, my grandparents acted as his guardians. So Charles spent most weekends at Innis House when he couldn't get back down, or Her Majesty and Prince Philip couldn't come up to see him. The Innis House visitors book is full of entries from Her Majesty coming to stay, taking out all the children that went to Gordonston. All three boys were there. So there's a very strong link. I then attended the school many years ago.
Loathe it.
Sorry?
Did you love it or loathe it?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I love a cold shower. It's fantastic. And actually now it's full circle. My children are now there. So they're in attendance as well. So.
But I think it's changed a lot over the years, hasn't it? I don't think it's any more a Colditz in Kilts.
It's a completely different place. It's all mollycoddling now. It's ridiculous. They turn on the hot water. They turn on the heating and everything.
Oh yes, that's terrible. But I know that, as you say, Prince Charles famously hated it there. He must have loved coming home at weekends occasionally to your parents' home.
Yeah, I think it was a big thing for him, and it was that small sense of home, and that small sort of homely feeling that he could go back to Innis and be not quite as grandly looked after as he was down in Windsor, but a modicum of friendship.
Yeah, I don't think it was about grandeur. It was more about family, wasn't it? A sense of family.
Yes.
So we've talked about family get-togethers. They sound lovely. If anyone's watching at the moment, they might think of those wonderful scenes from, I don't know, 4 Weddings and a Funeral or something, because Scots do it so well. We've got some more family photos. I think I'm not sure whose mostly family they are. They may be yours, Flora's. So if we whip through the family album, will you tell us who's who?
Yeah, that's me and my brother Andrew. Yeah. That's actually my granny's bedroom. So that's in my granny's bedroom at Lockbow, which would have gone to my dad, but he passed away when I was 10, so it's now my brother's. So yeah, that's Lockbow, and that's, and Ed knows all the technicalities and clearly knows the history frontwards and backwards in a way that I don't know at all. But essentially, that Lockbow is the house where my granny and grandpa resided after Innis went to my uncle Mark, who is Ed's dad. So that's me and my brother at Lockbow in my granny's bedroom.
There's some lovely other photographs we've got. And that's the family in the kitchen, I think.
Yeah, so that's the kitchen at Lockbow in front of the Arga. Love that thing. Love cooking there whenever I'm there. And that's my dad standing up, and my brother on the floor, and me on the chair. And I think is that Granny on the side? I don't know.
I think
that was Granny, and that's literally the only time I think we'll ever have seen a picture of your father anywhere near a cooking appliance.
Oh, is that right?
Maybe even there as well. I'm not sure.
And what's lovely about these is, we're talking about these grand Scottish estates and these beautiful ancient houses, but actually, when you just see you as a family, you're just an ordinary family, really, in the kitchen.
I love that picture. I want that picture framed. It's great.
Oh, well, we'll get that to you. We'll have a look for a few more I think we've got here.
Yeah, so that's us in a rowing boat out on the loch at Lockbow, and those images that you saw in the opening sequence of the loch specifically, that's right by the house. So yeah, that's my dad rowing, and since he's passed, that's always been something that whenever I'm at Loch na Boe, I always try and get out on a boat and row, just because that was something that he did with us. And a special time for sure.
You'll have to explain Loch na Boe. Obviously, anyone watching might obviously probably know Scottish loch.
So Loch na Boe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it means house by the loch or house on the loch. And loch is Scottish for lake. So we're really lucky. Loch na Boe, the house, is directly on a loch, and you sit and you have breakfast in the breakfast room and you look out onto the water, and it's truly magical. So that last picture, I mentioned reeling earlier, and our family gatherings during Hogmanay, and we reel, and that's me and my mum right before a reeling ball. I think it was the Northern Meeting, and I'm wearing my Tennant tartan sash, which I've been using recently, and as I've grown older, and I believe my cousin Miranda, who is Ed's sister, and Clemmy, also Ed's sister, was wearing that sash at one point, and it's really special for me to go to these reeling events wearing the Tennant tartan sash.
Yes, because all of the big families in Scotland do have. I don't know. Do you still call it a clan? And there is often a tartan to go with it.
I personally wouldn't call it a clan. I'm sure maybe technically it is, and Ed maybe speak to that.
No, it's not.
No, I wouldn't say my family's my clan, but I just call them family. But no, the tartan is still very much a part of life. Kilts, and we have it on the floor as a carpet, and I'm sure Ed, you do as well. I actually have it. I have it on my bed frame here in LA. So no, the tartan. I love the tartan.
It means something. So if I were to go up to your wardrobe upstairs, would there be a number of kilts there hanging in the wardrobe?
A few kilts, a few pairs of trousers in tartan.
Brilliant.
I've got some slippers in tartan. I've got, absolutely. I love it. It's everywhere. We've got, as Flora said, we've got it on the floor, we've got it on the walls. It's all over the shop.
Excellent. Nice to hear. Because it is something to be proud of. It's historic, isn't it? Just a couple more photographs. I think you'll like them. I think there's one coming up with you.
So some tartans aren't as nice as ours, but we have a really nice one.
So there's one.
That's Granny in the back on the left there, next to my mum. My wonderful mum, Andrea, and then that's me with my eyes shut in the middle, and my brother also, I think, with his eyes shut. Oh no, he's looking down for some reason. And then that's my dad standing on the right.
It wouldn't be a family picture if somebody didn't have their eyes shut or pulling a funny face. But it's lovely to see what a lovely family you are, and I've met your mum, Andrea, too. That's nice. You've got these wonderful buildings, estates, country houses, which is wonderful when you want to throw a party or something like that. But I know, Ed, you and your wife are now custodians, as you say, of Innis House. What is your role? You've inherited it. You then have to run the estate. When you inherit a beautiful, beautiful place like that, is that a burden, or is that just your future? Is that the way things go? Because it must be one heck of a responsibility.
I think it depends entirely on how much money you've got. Well, if you've got loads and loads, it's not a burden. It's an asset. We don't. So it's not. It is a burden, not an asset. If you see what I mean. It really depends on what state the house is in when you inherit. What state the grounds are in. Is it a business or just a big pile of bricks? Now, when I was incredibly lucky when I inherited it, my parents had spent the whole of the 90s completely refurbishing it. We never had any central heating when I was a kid. There was no radiators in the house anywhere. It was open fires and shivering that kind of kept you warm. And these big houses, the days of Downton Abbey, the days of hundreds of servants, they're gone. So unless you have unlimited funds, these houses have to work for themselves. So it's a constant battle of retaining the family legacy, running a business, but not letting it lose the charm of being a family home. My parents did it up beautifully in that every room, you go there and it would feel like you were going to see your friends. It didn't feel like a cold, drafty Scottish castle. It didn't feel like a commercial hotel. And that's the best to have.
So
we're not.
How do you make it earn its living? How does it earn money for you?
So my parents started it off as a wedding venue. That was their main business, with this huge marquee on the side, and we hosted weddings, and the bride's family got to stay in the house and all this kind of stuff, and that was great. And it's been a business since 1996. Many happy brides. Some even came back for second time round, third time round. So we can't have done something too wrong. We do funerals, we do bar mitzvahs. We'll do anything that someone wants to have in a nice setting. But actually, what we've started doing more, which we prefer as a business, is actually these kind of weekly lets. So you can actually take the entirety of Innis for a week. It sleeps 40 people.
Wow.
So you can have a real party, huge family occasion. You get used to all the ballrooms and the kitchens, and we just rent it out either as a dry hire, like a holiday cottage would be. It's just a bigger one. Or you can actually deal with us and our staff and our guys, and we can do a fully catered, fully staffed stay for a week.
That sounds
and
wonderful.
We found that's worked really, really well.
Do you live there and have to move out, or do you live elsewhere?
We don't live there for that very reason. We actually live a couple of miles down the road, just over the road from Lochnaboe, actually, where Flora's place is. So we'd love to live there. It would be great to play Monica the Glen and look down from the high windows on what we have. But with young kids, and my children are only 10 and 8, so it would be quite tough on them not having access to the gardens at weekends when there's weddings going on. They can't run around and play in the house because they've got to be quiet because there are guests. And when we give an exclusive use on the house, we'd have to move out every time.
Yeah.
So we live in a house just down the road. It's plenty big enough for the 4 of us. And that gives us complete carte blanche to operate Innis as a fully functioning venue.
So in a way, it is a business, but it is very important to you, clearly, to keep it in the family.
It's hugely important to keep it in the family, and it's hugely important to keep that family feel, because there are so many places in Scotland that you can go and stay that have got white walls and floorboards, and they feel Scottish castle-y, or you can go and stay in many hotels that have crisp white bed linen and views over a city. But actually, we want our guests to feel like they're just going to go and stay with friends.
Sounds wonderful.
That's what we aim for.
Party of 40 sounds brilliant, yeah. And so, Flora, as you said, you grew up more or less in Los Angeles, but your family own, as Ed was saying, Lochnaboe House, and the most beautiful property. And you spent just this last Christmas there, did you?
Well, that was a plan for sure, but didn't work out because my test release COVID test came back positive when I landed in the UK. So, and then I told my family, "Oh, you guys go up." So I told my mum, my brother, "You guys go up there, and I'll see you up there when my isolation has ended." But then they got turned around in the air twice trying to land at Aberdeen. So it kind of in the end just became too much, and we ended up spending Christmas in London, sadly. But I went up on my own on Boxing Day for a few days because I was going to be in Scotland for New Year anyway. So yeah, that was the intention. But we try and do every other year Scotland at Lochnaboe, which is I just love it.
It is the most extraordinary property, isn't it? How big is it, and how big are the grounds?
Oh God, I have no idea. I mean, Ed might even know. I don't know. I'm really not in on the numbers and the technicalities and stuff. I kind of know the feeling more than anything. But we have a beautiful loch that, as I said, the house sits on, and you can kind of see in these pictures. And the walk around the loch is one of the most special things. And so it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. There's no doubt about that. I mean, like I said at the beginning, that sort of scenery you don't get anywhere else in the world. And in order to get the green and the lakes and everything, you have to put up with a bit of bad weather from time to time. But look at that picture. The weather is gorgeous.
the rain and the weather, it kind of adds to the surreality of it in a way, and you get these incredible sunsets as you see there, and then when the sun is shining, it is impeccable.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, both of you are of this next generation moving on, and you both clearly feel very strongly about trying to hang on to the family. I was going to say asset, no, but the family legacy, which is encapsulated in these beautiful properties.
Yeah.
You could sell
I think
up.
it's really important. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I've got kids, and I want to be able to pass something on to them that they can cherish. And I think if we're disinterested in it, then our kids are never going to be interested in it. And then what's the point of having it? Let's say if that's the case, then you've got to, fish or cut bait and move on and, go and do something else, and let someone else enjoy the legacy. But I think for us, we moved up here in properly 2 years ago, and we've never looked back.
Have you had to learn as you go, or were you prepared for it? I mean, a lot of the land is farmland, and that needs to be managed. And obviously, an enormous house needs to be managed. Did you know about that, or are you learning on the job, or were you, as I say, trained?
Training to do that job, that's kind of hard. I think the adage every day is a school day. I always knew from day one that I was going to end up inheriting it. I went to the Royal Agricultural College in Cirencester, in Gloucestershire. Yeah. So I kind of can tell the difference between wheat and barley. Yeah. At a stretch. But everything else is learning. When I first took over in 2017 from my parents after my mum passed away, I remember sitting in the office on that first day just going, right, now what? I have no idea where to begin. Because my dad was away, and I just sat there. I sat there for the first day. I phoned up my wife, and I was like, I don't know where to start. Well, what am I supposed to do? And it was every day learning. You learn something. Something comes up to bite you in the ass every day.
Yeah, I'll bet. I can imagine. And I know, Flora, both of you are very, very different. You're doing in different worlds, and Flora you'll tell us about your directing, your movie making in a moment. But what about the responsibility of continuing the Tennant name? Your family is multifaceted, but as always in every generation, been pretty talented and pretty unusual. And you've got to keep that going. In other words, you've got to live up to the name. Is that a worry?
Yeah, that's why I rely on Flora for the talented and unusual. I'm not talented and I'm really boring. So
no, I think I don't know. I don't think one can worry about that in a way. You just got to do you, and whatever it is that feels natural to you, and whatever you kind of gel with, and you do things in your way, and in that way you continue the family name anyway, if that makes sense.
I guess, but I mean, there is something in your genes. There's no doubt about it. Tell us about your movie making career, because am I right? Did you go to the London Film School?
So we.
That's a very big deal. I mean,
yes, I left the UK when I was 7, and we moved around to various places, and then I ended up doing high school in Los Angeles. But for me, the UK was always home, and I think living away, I always kind of like romanticized it and always wanted to be back there. And so immediately when I could, I did leave the US, and I went to Edinburgh University, and it was always going to be Edinburgh or Scotland or somewhere like that. And I was really fortunate because I was able to get stuck back into reeling and be in Scotland and be not as far away from Loch Nebo and Granny and the family and stuff. And then I always wanted to do film my whole life for as long as I can remember. It's always been my thing, and always what I've wanted to do. And so I was at Edinburgh University, and I was doing politics, always with the eye to do film. And I found out you could do 3 years instead of 4 years and still get a degree. So I finished with a BA in politics rather than an MA. And I left to go to London Film School, where I was for 3 years. And at film school, the program is you do a grad film at the end of your time there, and that's kind of your finishing project. And I knew I wanted to do it at Loch Nebo, and the house had kind of just come into my immediate family, so had just kind of come into just become my brothers when my granny died. And I not only saw it as such a special location and such a unique opportunity to be able to shoot a place like that, but also saw it as an opportunity for me to get to know it and for me to establish that as home. And I mean, and I guess we'll go into this a bit, but that was truly one of the most special things about doing the film up there, is that it forged my own community up there and forged my own way of calling that home, just because I'd be going up by myself all the time, either writing or prepping or assessing situations or looking for shots, and then as we got closer to shooting the film, casting up there and looking for local people that wanted to get involved. And yeah, I'm sure we'll go into that, but yeah, so it's been a non-traditional route for me. I didn't grow up there per se, and all I can remember from growing up is the long drive and sitting in the back of the car and going down that driveway with the tall trees on either side, and knowing that we were going to see Granny. And now that drive has become something that I do on my own, and has kind of and it now is not just that, it is a part of my life as well, and my active life that I'm choosing. Yeah.
That's lovely. Yes, the idea of being, and we've all, I suppose, done family trips like that, where you're in the back of the car, but there's something you recognise, and you always feel you're coming home or you're going to see somebody special. And then when you grow up, you do it, or you do the drive yourself. When I've got a son who really wants to go to film school, and I said, you've got to make films. You know, if you want to go into film school, you've got to start making films. Did you always shoot films when you were younger, or is it something?
So that's actually I was never someone that was kind of with my phone taking loads of videos or making lots of movies, or I didn't have a Super 8 camera like, you know, Spielberg and all the rest of them. And I mean, not comparing myself to Spielberg at all, but you know, I wasn't the traditional like film kid. I wasn't a cinephile. I wasn't watching movies for hours and hours on end, but I grew up on musicals, so Singing in the Rain, Top Hat, and those were kind of like my loves. I was never watching cartoons or Saturday morning cartoons. It was always these old school musicals. And then as I continued to grow up, DVDs were coming out, and they had these behind the scene featurettes on DVDs, and I always wanted to watch those before I watched the movie. And I remember when I was like 12 or 13 watching Bridget Jones' Diary, which is actually one of my favorite films, but I wouldn't that's not usually my taste, but I was watching Bridget Jones' Diary behind the scenes featurettes, and I saw them doing that, and I was like, that is what I want to do with everything I have. So for me, it's more it's not, films aren't like entertainment for me. It's more a sense of perspective, and when I watch something that I connect with, or I've had that thought before, or I've experienced that weird niche little feeling, it's that sense of connection to another human and another human's mind, and I just want to do that with everything I have. So for me, it's not necessarily about the movies, it's more about film.
Well, you've done awfully well. I think you've already won an award for Best Director for your short film, We All Just Want to Be Mad.
Yeah, no, I mean, the British Short Film Awards last year. I did.
Well done. I mean,
thanks.
I mean, you know, what a competitive field you're already in, but you've done so well. I want to show a clip from it, if you don't mind then. Now, this might get people sort of thinking, what's that about? Maybe you can explain afterwards, but let's just have a look at a clip from your film, Welcome to My Party. Let's have a look at this.
Welcome to my party.
And now everybody at home is thinking, what's that all about?
And we had a lot of pushback from my aunt, someone sitting on the table like that, and I'm sure it's a little. I don't think it's actually seen already.
I was waiting for all my silver to go crashing to the floor.
Exactly.
Yeah, we borrowed some stuff actually. Yeah.
we wouldn't be so rude as to ask the director what's that all about, but it makes you want to watch the next bit to see what's going to happen next. But certainly, what a fantastic setting.
Yeah, no, I was so lucky, and I mean, you can see why. I just knew I was going to shoot my grad film the day I started the program.
How did you fund it? How did you even start to make it and cast it and do what you have to do? A film like that takes a lot of making.
Yeah, so funding-wise, we did a Kickstarter. We actually did 2 Kickstarters, one pre-production and one we ran out of money in post, which always happens. So we did a second one post. And then I got money from the school as part of the program. Each student gets a set amount of money to do their grad film, and then you kind of figure out how to get the rest. So yeah, we did Kickstarter as most people do, which went really, really well, and we had almost 100 backers. And yeah, so that was the funding aspect of it. And then in terms of casting, I mean, yeah, it was like a year and a half of prep and everything, and before we shot it. But I sent out a casting call on Spotlight and had various loads of submissions, both for the boy and the girl, and the older woman that you see there. Well, she's not older, but the older character, I suppose. Yeah, I was really lucky with Isabel, the lead. She's so talented, and she's such a natural in front of the camera. And she was in the Netflix series The Witcher, yeah, we had her, and that was she's the girl of mine. And yeah, Ali, who you see in the scene as well, she was actually someone who her agent had put her forward to the casting call. And it was so funny. I opened this application, and I was like, who is that woman? I know her. And I remembered a few years prior, I'd been on a plane and was watching a short film that they had on like a British Airways flight, and it was an amazing short film that I absolutely loved. So weird and quirky and just like fantastic. This Irish short film, and Ali had been in it, and I was like, oh my god, that's so funny. This woman, you know, I love this film, and I remember her from the film, and she's applied for mine, and I kind of didn't really think anything of it because I was thinking I was looking for more of a Joanna Lumley type. I was like, no, Ali's not right, you know, I'll find someone else, but hopefully work with her in the future. So I put out this casting call on this, like, it's a kind of a UK like posh version of Gumtree, and I had all these women from across the country applying to my casting call and sending me videos of them at home making cakes and picking up their kids and in their chalet and wherever. And it was such an incredible experience. All these older women getting in touch with me saying, you know, they've always wanted to be an actress, but, you know, life got in the way and they had children, or they took this other path, and they now see this as this amazing opportunity to do something that they've always wanted to do, or not even that, just give something random a try, and they're looking for something new in their older age. And it was such a wonderful experience of just joy, and people sending through their life and snippets of their life with such enthusiasm. So I had something like 170 responses.
Wow.
From women across the UK, and I met with about 12 of them, and then in like train stations across the country and stuff like this, and then I auditioned 5 of them with Isabel, who I'd cast already, and ended up casting this amazing woman, this fantastic woman called Vanessa. And such energy, such life. She'd never been in anything before, as none of these women really had. And then I was in a lecture in film school, and we were watching something, and I just had this like light bulb moment. I was like, oh my God, it's not the Joanna Lumley type I need, it's the Helena Bonham Carter type I need. And I realized I'd made a casting error, and just not cast not cast the right person. And I rang up Vanessa and I was like, I'm so sorry, it's not you, it's me. And it really was one of those it's not you, it's me situations. And I was like, I've just it's not the right fit, and I need to cast otherwise. But Vanessa ended up being in the opening sequence anyway as an extra, and we're actually still friends and we communicate via email. But yeah, so then I rung up Ali and her agent and I was like, you know, I've made a mistake, like it's you, I would love to have you in the film. And so yeah, so that was kind of a bit of an insight into the casting process. So I actually ended up casting someone else in Ali. And then, yeah, I mean, then stories can continue. But in terms of casting for other parts, so I have Rosemary in the film. She has a speaking role. So Rosemary, she's known me since before I was born. She lived at Lochnabow with her husband and worked for my granny and grandpa. I think she said 40 years. It's in an interview that you'll see later. But yeah, she cooked and her husband kept the gardens and stuff at Lochnabow, and she's just been such a special woman in my life as I've done the film now, because yeah, she was in the film and I asked her to be in the film just because she's got all this energy and she's just this fantastic woman with so much to say, and her own like she's just so herself. And so I immediately wanted her in the film. So she's a woman buying fish at the fish counter in the local Tesco. I through being at Lochnabow, kippers was always something that I'd heard of and knew of, and my dad grew up eating kippers and I knew that he loved kippers. So the more time I was spending up there, I kind of would go to the Tesco fish counter and buy kippers for myself for breakfast. So then of course that was written into the film, and so I wanted to shoot at the local fish counter. And so speaking to Tesco and the organisation there, I got put in touch with Alison, who's the manager at Tesco, and Alison works at the fish counter, and so then she was in the film. So Rosemary and Alison are in this scene at the Tesco fish counter with Isabel, our lead, and then I'm sure we'll get into, but the Elgin District Pipe Band. I obviously wanted bagpipes in the film, and not in a tropey kind of like it's Scotland, so we have to have bagpipes in the film kind of way, but bagpipes for me, I think. Having been away from Scotland in my childhood and in growing up, the bagpipes were always just that sound that kind of brought me back to being there and being home, or where I thought of as home. And Ed played the pipes, I'm sure, and still does. And Mark, my uncle, plays the pipes, and Mark piped at my dad's funeral, and the pipes were always a part of Hogmanay and everything. So for me, Scotland truly is the bagpipes are truly a part of Scotland for me. So anyway, so then obviously bagpipes were written into the film, and I got to know the Elgin District Pipe Band looking for pipers for the film. And
well, let's have a look, because we've got that clip. It's very quirky, and you don't sort of, it's quite weird the way it suddenly pops up, but let's have a look at it because it's really lovely. This is a clip from your movie. Well, there you are. As you said, that's the Elgin Pipe Band. And Ed, did Flora say there that you played the bagpipes?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I've played since I was 6.
Gosh, you have to. That can't be easy when you're 6.
No, you start on something that looks a bit like a recorder, and you don't really start the actual bagpipes until you're I was about 9 or 10.
Well, I wish I'd known. I would have asked you to bring your bagpipes with you and give us something here. But not easy to learn to play. But I imagine the only way you can play bagpipes properly is from the age of 6. You learn as you go. over a long period.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they are, after all, an instrument of war. And as my late mother always said, the definition of a Scottish gentleman is a man who can play the bagpipes but doesn't.
Yes, I get that. I get that. But sometimes people make fun of the sound of the bagpipes, but that's presumably because they haven't heard them play particularly well, because there's something visceral about the sound of the bagpipe, isn't there, Ed?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it's one of those instruments that it's a bit of a Marmite thing. But for US viewers, it's as in you don't like it or you do like it. But I think it can be played incredibly badly, which is an awful noise. But actually, if you want to get the true magic of the instrument, it's actually to hear it over water or to hear it from a reasonable distance. If you're quite genuinely standing right behind it, it's pretty loud. I mean, most pipe bands now, you'll see if they're practicing, they'll be wearing earplugs, because the decibel level is actually over the legal working limit in Scotland. Wow. So you'll see a lot of them practicing earplugs. But I mean, something like at Lochnaboe, where Flora is, if someone's standing on the far side playing that instrument and you're at the house, there's something about it over water, or if they're very high up, it is and played beautifully, played well. And I find actually a lone piper is nowhere near as magical as a band. I think a mass pipes and drums, I think, is just one of the most extraordinary noises.
So when you were learning and when you play now, do you play with a band or on your own?
So when I was learning, you sort of learn on your own. But when I was at my first school, when I was 8 to sort of 13, we had a very small, I would call it more of a sort of gathering rather than a band. But by the time I went to Gordonston, I was the pipe major of the school pipe band there. And I played with other pipe bands around and about here. We played with a pipe band in Edinburgh probably 15 years ago that was, they launched a thing for 1,000 pipers to play together, and we marched down Princess Street. Made the front page of the Times, actually. I wasn't on it, but there was 1,000 pipers playing as a mass pipes and drums down Princess Street in Edinburgh, and we went underneath the bridge at Haymarket at the end, and it was extraordinary. When obviously we go under a low bridge, the noise reverberates around, and the pipes you could hear very loudly. As soon as the drums came in behind you, as a player, you couldn't hear anything except the drums. They drowned out absolutely everything. It was incredible.
Gosh. Oh, that must have been wonderful. The tradition is still going. Flora, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in the lead up to the film, I went to quite a few of the pipe bands practices, and they practiced at the local hall. And it's just all these pipers and drummers in this single room, and the noise is completely deafening. And I've actually sent you guys some behind the scenes of that, so I think you'll see that in a following sequence. But yeah, it's just the noise is madness. And it's interesting, Ed, what you said about the pipes over water, and that's actually I wasn't aware of that, but that's actually how the film ends. The lone piper is on the other side of the lock, and she has to row across the lock to him. So yeah.
Well, I guess that's why it was an instrument of war, because there's something about the resonance, the sound that does carry across vast spaces. And that's why maybe it does sound better across water or from a very long distance. So what are your future projects? Flora first, what's the next thing for you?
So I'm writing my first feature film, just so feature being a full-length film. And I've just moved out to LA about three months ago for my career, to kind of transition to being a full-time writer-director. So yeah, I'm writing my first feature, and I love it out here, and I'm so lucky to be able to live out here. But the UK is definitely home for me, so I do want to shoot my feature in the UK, and it's a British film as well. So yeah, that's kind of my next thing.
And how does a film director such as you get your name known enough to be able to get the sort of funding to make the sort of movies that start to build your career? Is it constantly about attending the right parties and making the right contacts, or what?
That's the thing. There's really no set route to becoming a writer director. You kind of just figure it out as you go along, and you're always just sending your stuff to people, telling people about your stuff, and it really depends like what it is that you're doing along the way. So in London anyway, I was working on set, and you're always kind of meeting people through there, but I'm taking a different approach. I'm working in a different realm, and hoping, I mean, out here it's different because you're meeting people all the time in the industry. But yeah, it's just always about just sharing your stuff and not taking things personally, and just getting it out there. And if people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. And also being proud of it. I think you reach the point where you realize that you love your stuff, and in that way it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks, because you want it to be out there because you love it. And so
tough business.
Yeah, it's kind of go along.
You're doing awfully well. Ed, what about you? Now, I gather there's something about a solar panels project. Is this something for the future, or is it something you've already done?
No, this is something for the future. I mean, we because we're quite a big enterprise, we're sort of 5,500 acres with lots of houses, and we've got 33 properties that are on the rental market on the estate. We've got 5 different farms with, we've got a lot going on. We're really cognizant at the moment of the green movement and the desire to kind of clean up our act as a business.
Yes.
We think the future of British farming is going to be linked more to green credentials rather than just your production. So I think post-Brexit, a lot of the subsidies that are being paid are all going to be linked to what we're doing to sequester carbon, what we're doing to make our operation greener. And we actually have on the estate, we have an ex-World War II airfield that was used it was built in 1940 and used all the way up to 1946. And we bought it back off the Ministry of Defence in about 2006-07. And we're turning that into what will be, when it gets built finally, it's taken nearly 10 years of R&D, but we should be building it late this year or early next, and it will be Scotland's largest solar farm. It'll be sort of 430 acres of panels with a centralized battery storage system, which will mean that we can hold power for the grid. And sort of, the problem with like wind and solar is that your power goes like this. And you've got to get this for the grid. So we use the storage facility, which will then like smooth out our electricity provision. We're putting in some high-speed charging points for electric cars for clients at the house. We've converted all our heating for the big house. We run off wood chip from our own estate, so we have a big biomass system. So we don't, we're not burning any oil anymore. We're not burning any coal. So I don't know, you could look at it as providing carbon neutral weddings, maybe, if people so desire it. But really for us, it's doing everything we can. We're trying to convert tractors and things like this to biodiesel, so that we're not burning standard red diesel in all our vehicles, because there's a lot of movement during the farming cycle, which all contributes to our footprint. So I mean, I think for us, for me and Zoe, we've got the green project on the side, which is huge, and it's kind of really long-term impact, we hope, for our kids. It'll benefit them. But the other big thing for us is we're sort of branching more out into holiday cottages. So instead of having these long-term rental properties, the tourism up here is becoming more and more and more. It's been a bit of a hidden gem. When anyone comes to Scotland, they go to Fort William, they go to Loch Ness, they go and do the North Coast 500, and then they do Edinburgh and Glasgow, and this kind of bit on this second horn of Scotland is just forgotten about, which is nice in camper vans, but it's seen an increase, and so we're going to look at this holiday cottage business and hopefully have 2 or 3 of them going as well, which would be great.
No, I think the idea of a carbon neutral wedding is a great sales pitch. It's very unique. Why not go for it?
I think it's quite interesting. I think actually it wouldn't be the generation of people getting married now. I think it's actually my kids' generation that would think about that. I think most of our brides, they're usually granddaughters of oil explorers from the North Sea. So I don't think their ancestors would give too kindly to paying extra for a carbon neutral wedding.
I'm going to pick up on what you said, something you said earlier. Is it really true that you occasionally have a bride back for another wedding at the same location?
Yes, we've had that twice. Yeah.
It's quite weird, isn't it? That's a movie. There's a movie in that, Flora. I'm sure there's a movie in that.
I never thought of weddings as a repeat business, really, but it's happened twice. So,
wow.
Yep.
Love it. Well, look, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, it's just been absolutely brilliant to get a glimpse into what is a very unusual world that both of you inhabit, actually. And it's just been lovely. Thank you so much for talking to me about your various projects and your beautiful, beautiful homes. Absolutely sensational. So thank you very much. And I'll wish you both goodbye. And as I was saying to everybody earlier, it's Scotland Week. So we'll leave you with what Viking can offer you on a cruise around the British Isles, particularly to see the wonderful sights of Scotland. And we'll also leave you with another look at the whole of Flora's movie. We all just want to be mad. Maybe we do. Until I see you again next week, stay safe. Goodbye.
Immerse yourself in the treasures of the British Isles on a remarkable 15-day voyage with Viking. With 2 days in charming Bergen, you can explore the historic Bryggen waterfront, the home of renowned composer Edvard Grieg, and enjoy its majestic peaks. In Scotland's Shetland Islands, step into the last vestiges of empires past. Learn about the Shetland bus, a heroic effort to save Norwegians during World War II. And of course, meet the island's friendliest residents. In the Scottish Highlands, legendary Loch Ness and impressive Iroquois Castle delight the imagination. Edinburgh, with its famous castle and old town, promise more civilised pleasures. The Orkney Islands greet you with verdant landscapes, fascinating architecture, and remnants of civilizations that date to the Viking Age and long before. While the staggering beauty of the Wester Ross presents another side of magical Scotland. In Belfast, you can explore the city's landmarks, or set out for the majesty of Giant's Causeway. Liverpool's waterfront is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and of course, the city is hallowed ground for Beatles fans. The coastal Welsh city of Holyhead will charm you with its natural beauty and historic castles, while Ireland's Dublin is one of Europe's great capitals of culture. Your journey ends in magnificent London, where a 2-day stay gives you ample time for an in-depth exploration of such famous places as Westminster Abbey, Buckingham Palace, and nearby Stonehenge.
I love you, I love you, I love you.
I heard someone say it once, in such a funny way, almost as if she were being taught how to say it.
Give it a little bit more, just a little bit more slack in that, in the line.
I love you, 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 I love you.